Hello, this is Parker Johnstone from GRA211 Interactive Animation class. Alright, we're going to be looking at building an ad starting with ActionScript 3. So I'm going to come up to File, hit New. I'm going to make this quick, so I'm not going to do anything too complicated. When we click New, what we're going to be looking for is the size. So we're going to match the 250 by 250 small square example from the choices that we have for the assignment. The platform type, when we start, we're going to select ActionScript 3.0 instead of HTML5 Canvas at the moment, and we're going to say Create. Now, to give an example of how ActionScript 3 works, I'm going to create a simple button. It's not even going to move. It's just going to be nothing fancy. I'm going to change this to black with a green border around it. I'm going to add some text here that says button on it, and I'm going to make that a really bright green, so just kind of, just kidding. I want it to stand out. Alright. Okay. I'm going to place this in the middle. Now, to make an interactive object using ActionScript, I'm going to turn this button into a symbol. So convert to symbol and name it button, just button. It's going to show up in the library over here. So I'm going to get rid of the one that I have just so we could show that, hey, got this in our library. We can place a button anywhere we want now. Now when we do that, it's going to create an instance of our button object, or our button symbol. I'm going to name my button instance so that I can make sure that ActionScript is choosing this button and not something else. So if things get complicated, you're going to want to name instances. So in the Properties window, or Properties tab, I'm going to come down beneath where it says button. And if I hover over it, it says instance name. I'm going to say button. I'll just name it button instance, just so we know what we're talking about from this video standpoint. All right, I'm going to hit enter, and now this instance on my screen, on my scene, is named button instance. Okay, when I select this, I'm going to hit F9. And I'm going to bring up the actions window. Now, I have to have this button selected so it knows that this button instance is what I want to attach code to. That's where ActionScript 3.0 code comes into play. I'm going to come over to this symbol here and hover over it. It says code snippets. It's going to open up a code snippets window, and from the ActionScript folder here, I'm going to drill down to Actions, and in Actions find the click to go to web page. Double clicking on that inserts my ActionScript 3 code. I'm going to close this code snippets window so we can see that our button's here. Now it gives you some instructions that have been commented out. That's why it's gray. Now here where the code starts, we see it's referencing the button instance. So this is what I named this button. So if I click here, it says button instance. If I come back to the code, button instance. So now I know that it's correct. And with ActionScript, we added an event listener called the mouse event.click. So that's your left click. When we left click, it's going to play this function here, this F1 underscore click to go to web page function. Here's the function just below it, F1 underscore, or FL, excuse me, underscore click to go to web page, and it's associated with the event mouse event. And the event, or the action that we're going to perform when we click, is navigate to URL. That's ActionScript 3's version to go to a new web page. So navigate to URL, it's a new URL request, and right now it says it's going to go to adobe.com. So I'm going to leave this as Adobe for this example, and I'll change it when we do the HTML version later, just so we know the difference. But for now, when I click this button, I want to go to adobe.com. Alright, so I'm going to close that. Now I forgot to save, so I'm going to make sure that I save this. So I'm going to say save as, and in my add example here, I'm going to name this I'm going to put my last name, so when I turn things in, I know that this belongs to me. I'm going to say add underscore, and I'm going to say ActionScript, so that I know that this Flash file, this project file, is the one I was working on to build an ad with ActionScript. Hit save. Now that I know this is saved, what I'm going to do is come up to Control. So we want to test this out. So we can. It's going to build an SWF file for us when we hit test. So this way, when we test from here, we'll be able to see it work. Hit test, and it opens right away because there's not much going on. Here we see our button. Now, to know that it's been given code, or it's associated with ActionScript code as something that you can interact with, it's going to change the mouse cursor. So as soon as I hover over the symbol, it's going to change the pointer to a hand with a pointer finger. That way we know that it worked. We have something associated with it. At least it worked to the point where the file knows that there's something should happen when you click on this. Now what we know is that it's going to open up a web page through my default browser, which is Chrome at the moment. It's going to open up to adobe.com. That's what we want. That's what we hope for. So when I click, it's going to open Chrome and go to adobe.com. Welcome back, Parker. Thank you, Adobe. Alright, so we know that works. Now we're done with the interaction with ActionScript 3 for the SWF file. So I'm going to close this. Now just to show, in AdExample, when I save my file here and I did the test, it did create a SWF file for me. So we can open that right back up and click the button, and it does everything we want to. So in a way, hitting Control and testing actually publishes it and finishes the file for you. Now, just to be sure that we want to hit publish and make sure it does the same thing, I'm going to delete this version, that SWF file, just to show that we can come up here, hit File, go to Publish Settings, and make sure that we have Flash selected, which is the SWF. We don't want the wrapper, because then if I hit Publish, it's going to generate an HTML file. And what happens there, actually, you know what, I'll show you. I'm going to leave this checked because it's by default. So if you leave it checked by default, you'll see what happens. It's going to create two files, an SWF file and an HTML file. Now, I'm going to leave everything by default here, and I'm going to hit publish. Actually, hold on. Make sure that, so we always want to make sure that we where our file is going, and that's the AdExample folder that I created for this video. That's where I want it to go. Make sure when you're doing this that you always check that folder to make sure you know where your file is going. And I named this, it's going to name it my last name, Johnstone underscore add underscore ActionScript .swf, which is a Flash player file. I'm going to hit save that location. Now I'm going to hit publish, which will now publish the two files I mentioned. Now we had the Flash file, or SWF file, select checkbox picked, as we can see here. And now it also generated an HTML file by itself, because we had HTML wrapper picked. Now the problem with this now in 2021 is that when we open this, it's gonna pop open and have this Get Adobe Flash Player button. That's not good now because Flash Player is not supported anymore. It used to be that people who wanted to play Flash files in their browser, they need the Flash Player as a plugin. If they do this once, They wouldn't have to do it again every time they opened a Flash file with ActionScript. If they had player, it would play for them. And that's all we used to have to do. Now Flash is gone. We need to do HTML5 and the canvas and a JavaScript file. So this is why we don't want to have this HTML wrapper checked off here. So I'm gonna delete what I just created. I'm gonna take the SWF file and HTML file, delete these, just so we can see what happens. So here's my project file. Now when I come into publish, I'm gonna uncheck this HTML wrapper, and then I'm gonna leave everything else the same because I already checked the folder where it's gonna go. Now I'm gonna hit publish, and now in my folder there should only be the SWF file extension. And when I open that, it's going to open my Flash movie with our button that now clicks open adobe.com. Okay. Now to make HTML5, there's a couple of things that we can do. Let's say you went through and you took a couple of hours or longer, you made this big animated movie, did a lot of work. Now we have your ActionScript version, but we need to output it both as ActionScript, the Flash file, and HTML5. So without having to change too much of your animated work, what we want to do is come up to File and say Convert to HTML5 canvas. Now the nice thing that Animate does for us here is that it doesn't overwrite our ActionScript version. What it's going to do is it's going to pop open it's going to make us save a new Flash native file, which is nice because then it's going to even name it for us. So Johnstone the add underscore ActionScript is what I named it before. It's going to add on another underscore in HTML5 canvas to let me know that it took my original file and we're turning it into HTML5 canvas. That's great. I'm going to leave it like that, just so we know what we're doing. And it's going to put it next to my original file. Now that it's converted it over, I've got both projects open up here, and I can tab over. Here's my original ActionScript file. Now I have my HTML canvas file, and you can see in parentheses up here it says canvas. That's great. That's fine. Now some things have changed in the background, especially with how the code works. Now we're not using ActionScript for code anymore, so the button's not going to work like we wanted it to. To show you what that means, I'm going to select the button instance, which is still named button instance. I'm going to hit F9 to open the actions window. And there's not going to be code right away here, but in the other file what we did was we added actions this is on frame 1. So this is what I did before. So if I select this, all the code that I created before where it used button instance and navigate to URL, then adobe.com, this is all gray, and it has these slashes, forward slashes here, to show that it's commented out. Now, commented out means you can leave notes, and they're not actually code. These lines are ignored. These 16 lines in our script file are completely ignored by anything that runs the script, because it's all ActionScript, and we are now in the realm of HTML5 and JavaScript. Okay, what do we need to do? Well, we have, when you convert your animation over, all the animation, all the timing, the timeline, all that stuff's the same. It'll play your movie the same. Now, but what we need is to fix the button, because the button won't work now that we've come over here. So now we need to select the button again, and now we come over and add the code snippet. But this time we're going to go to HTML5 canvas folder, and we're going to look for actions, just like in ActionScript. Opening actions, we'll see click to go to web page, just like we did in ActionScript. But this time, when it generates code, it's going to be the JavaScript version of our previous code. Now there's going to be some differences here. And the nice thing is that it shows us the commented out code from before. So on ActionScript, we started that this line here starts with button instance that we named our button. It adds an event listener called mouseEvent.click. In JavaScript, we need to have this dot button instance. So it's going to add this dot in front. It's still adding an event listener, but in JavaScript it's called click instead of mouseEvent.click. Now we've created a function just like we did before called click to go to web page. Here's the function right below it, click to go to web page, and now we have another change. So for ActionScript it's called navigate to URL. In JavaScript it's called window.open. But inside the parentheses, instead of saying new URL request for ActionScript, we just go straight into naming the web page that we want to go to. That's great. Now to show you a difference, I'm going to come in here and type in Microsoft just to show that it goes to a different page and that it's working. Now this isn't exactly what you want, because if you want to create ads that work for, you want it to do the exact same as before, you leave it as Adobe or whatever website you wanted to reference. Just for this example, for this video, I'm going to say Microsoft. Okay. Now that we've updated the code, so we changed it from ActionScript 3.0 over to Canvas and JavaScript. I'm going to do the same thing I did before, Control, and I'm going to test it. Now, just like before, testing is kind of like publishing. It's going to create files for me. Now it's going to create 3 files this time. It's going to create an HTML file. It's going to create a JavaScript file that the index file is going to rely on, and it's going to create a new folder called images, because it's going to save this button symbol as an image. Alright, Control, test, builds it out, opens Chrome for me, and we can check. So it's working at the moment. There's no errors because we can see the cursor changing. It's white background on white background. To check to see if it's there, you can right click in Chrome and say inspect, and you can come over and see that our actual movie is still 250 by 250. It's just not showing up because it's white on white, but our button's here and it shows a link. That's what we want. And if we click on this link, or this button link, it should open up Microsoft.com in a new tab. And there it is. Okay, that's what we want. Now when I check my folder with my saves, here's the 3 files. This is the HTML file that we generated. Here's the JavaScript file that takes the actions out, the click button action, our left click action event, and the images. Our symbol that it created is turned into a PNG, and it separated the text out. So the background, the rectangle I created is separate, and the text is separate. Now it realigns them how I had, the way that I wanted to when it's finished. But it does this so that if I changed the size of the text or the color of the text or anything, it's not embedded inside. It's not one image. So that's why you'll see this separated out when you're done. And when you'll need to load these 3 files in the same root directory on a hosted web server. So if you're hosting your own page, or if you hand it over to somebody else to load it, they need all these things in order for this to work. Okay, so now we're done. Now we have our original project file for ActionScript. We converted it to HTML5. When we converted it to HTML5, we updated the code so that it was the JavaScript version of the action we wanted instead of the ActionScript version. And now we have all of our files in one folder. And what you can do is highlight them all, right-click. I have 7-zip, but you can say send to a compressed zip folder. It's going to take the name of the first file at the top, and I'm going to put my last name, add, and then say project files. So I know that in the zip folder are all of these project files, and it keeps them all together just like this. So and it keeps their names protected so that I can upload just the one zip to Brightspace, and I know that all my names are protected. And the reason for that is Brightspace renames files. I don't know why they do that. They think it's probably handy for faculty to make sure that when they download submissions, it's all named. The name includes the date and everything else. But we can't have this JavaScript file can't be changed because this HTML file references this name directly. It's looking for the location of it and the name. And if we change that, this HTML file is not going to know what to do. Same thing with the images folder. If I change or move these images, it won't know what to do. I'll show you an example. So if I open this up, we can see the button. If I deleted this folder with the images in it, and I open this up again, everything's gone because the button artwork's gone. It doesn't know where it's at. It needs them back. But if I Control Z, undo my mistake, bring this folder with the images in it, Canvas says thank you. I now know where I can find your button artwork. Just a little bit of insight on how this works out. Alright, so now that's how ActionScript 3.0 worked. That's how we create buttons. When we're associating actions like this, we're referencing the symbol for it. If it's the artwork, right? So you can have invisible artwork if you want, and then associate actions with that if somebody wanted to create an invisible button. This is all based on layers. So if something were to be in front or placed in front of this button, like if I had something that was invisible in front of the button, I wouldn't be able to click on it. It would be like, imagine layers, so you have like a plane of glass that's preventing you from actually touching the button. So if some people are having issues with that, that may be the cause. So if you were trying to associate an action with the background element or the background itself, and something was in front of it, images or anything else, you wouldn't be able to click it, you wouldn't be able to reach it, because there'd be things blocking your, imagine something blocking your finger. Okay. That concludes this video, and I wish everyone luck and hope for being able to pick up and understand what's happening when they create these two versions, both ActionScript and HTML5. Again, ask me for help at any time.